Critical Role's brand new animated series, The Mighty Nein, is finally here, the first 3 episodes debuting this week on Amazon Prime. And good God, guys, am I seriously blown away by how freaking good this show is. Hello everyone, I'm Finn. Welcome back to finnfilms. As those of you who are familiar with my videos probably know, I am a massive Dungeons & Dragons nerd and a longtime fan and lore master for Critical Role. In today's video, we will once again be breaking down and explaining the Mighty Nein animated series, this time with episode 2. An episode which focuses on the kind of backstory and origins of our characters Fjord and Jester pre-campaign, as we see some absolutely amazing Fjord backstory animation scenes and moments in this episode, even getting an epic homage to the original Campaign 2 animated opening. As well, we get some information on what is going on with Xhorhas and the missing beacon, as in this episode we'd see the appearance of one of the biggest fan favorite Matt Mercer NPCs in Critical Role, Essek Thelyss. So then join me today for the Mighty Nein episode 2, Explained. Episode 2 of the Mighty Nein opens with Fjord training with Captain Vandrin on his ship. This being a scene from Fjord's backstory, pre the events in Trostenwald in episode 1 of Campaign 2, as we see Vandrin wielding the Sword of Fathoms, the blade granted to him via his warlock pact with the demigod-like being the Great Leviathan Uk'otoa, though obviously Fjord is completely unaware of this at the time. We see that Fjord at this point in our story is still the lost, bullied person he was as a child, the young man having very little confidence in himself, though he looks up to Vandrin like a father figure, Vandrin trying to distill confidence and abilities within Fjord, as according to Vandrin, Fjord lets lesser men define him as weak and a coward, Vandrin having his classic southern drawl, which Fjord will later adopt in this episode. The two are then interrupted as a storm hits the ship, Vandrin saying he found me in passing, referring to the Great Leviathan Uk'otoa. They rush up to the deck trying to batten down the ship, as we see these crazy water open ocean animations, as within the light of the lightning we briefly see the outline of Uk'otoa, which is freaking terrifying. Fjord yells to Sabian as the man rushes down below deck, Fjord following him as he sees Sabian light a fire next to a barrel of gunpowder, as we know from Fjord's backstory that Sabian was the one that sabotaged the ship, Sabian then stabbing Fjord in the chest, and then running above deck, jumping overboard. Fjord, bleeding out, crawls above deck as he yells to abandon ship. As he does so, the ship explodes, launching Fjord overboard as we watch him sink down below the ocean, and an animation that is a mirror of the opening animation for Campaign 2, which is a freaking awesome callback. As the screen fades to black, we hear the voice of Uk'otoa ringing out, telling Fjord to breathe, as we watch his eyes snap open. Fjord wakes up, having been washed ashore, the rest of his fellow crew members dead around him, as unbeknownst to Fjord, he was saved by Uk'otoa, the demigod making him a warlock in the process. Fjord then finds Vandrin's hat and sees his falchion, the Fathoms blade, stuck on shore. Fjord cobbling together some clothes and putting on Vandrin's forearm gauntlets. As he puts Vandrin's hat to sea, Fjord assuming his mentor is dead. He then claims the Fathoms blade, sheathing it on his back. As he does so, we see a mode of magic emanate from him, casting out into the ocean. As deep within the waters, we hear Uk'otoa say, "Grow." Meanwhile, Dairon is training Bo how to use her stunning strike. Dairon giving Bo her mission, to travel to Trostenwald to meet with a contact who will give her the name of the person who is training the Volstrucker. As we are beginning to see just how our troop of adventurers is going to all end up meeting together in Trostenwald, as we know that Caleb and Knott are heading to Trostenwald to the carnival, and we know Mollymauk will be there because the Fletching Traveling Carnival is in Trostenwald, which leaves only Jester left. As we then flash over to Nicodranas in the lavish chateau, as we see an amazing musical number from Jester's mother, the Ruby of the Sea, in all of her glory, and goddamn, is she fucking amazing. We see Jester roaming the bar, grabbing a glass of wine and replacing with a dildo, because, you know, Jester things. Jester laughing and speaking to the traveler, her friend, and according to her, a god, as we see that there is no one standing next to her, Jester just talking to thin air. Jester then heads backstage where we see her mother's bodyguard, the Minotaur Blood. As Jester's mother has forgotten an important part of her act, Jester's then dropping it down to her, as we see magical images of her mother dressed up in different sexy costumes roam around the lavish chateau. If it isn't obvious, Jester's mother is a high-end courtesan, Jester having lived her life within the walls of the lavish chateau, her mother being overly protective and never wanting her to wander far. Her and Marion then meet backstage, Jester excited to paint the new backdrop with her tomorrow, but her mother can't do it, because she has to spend tomorrow with Lord Sharp, the man who is the overseer of Nicodranas. We then move over to Bo, who is staying at a shady inn for the night, as we see that Caleb and Knott are breaking into the stables of the same inn, the two of them running low on money. Knott asks Caleb why he doesn't just sell his necklace to get the money, asking if it was a gift from his mother. Caleb making a face, as this likely was the case, or it has something to do with his parents. Caleb having intense trauma at the memory of his parents, as we know that during his Volstrucker training as a youth, he was indoctrinated into Empire propaganda, and he then burnt his parents alive, believing they were traitors to the Empire. Yeah, my sad wizard boy has a little bit of trauma, you might say. Over in Xhorhas, we see one of the best Matt Mercer NPCs, which fans of Campaign 2 immediately recognized, Essek Thelyss, a powerful Dunamancer, as he then goes and meets with the Bright Queen. The Queen is livid at the theft of the beacon, saying if it is not retrieved within 2 days, she will send her army to get it, as she chastises Essek, saying that if he was consecuted, he might realize how important this theft really is. As we learn that Essek, unlike many others in Xhorhas, is not a believer of the religion surrounding the beacon. Instead, he views it as an important, powerful magical artifact that should be studied, not worshipped. As well, we see a bit of a change here from Campaign 2, as the way the show frames this is that the dynasty only possesses one beacon, while in the campaign they have several. As the Queen says, without the beacon, the souls of their people cannot be reborn, meaning every death from now until they find the beacon is permanent, seemingly implying again that they only have one beacon. The Queen is also worried about the Empire discovering the power the beacon truly holds, as she suspects that a Dunamancer within Xhorhas helped the Volstrucker steal the beacon. Essek then walks and talks with the Queen's general, the man asking how Essek's mother is, as we see that Essek is a bit cagey at this question, the man giving Essek a shard of broomstone he found in the wasteland, as Essek's mother loves ancient artifacts. Broomstone, we know, are the magical crystals that kept the floating Magocracy cities of Aeor and Avalir afloat during the Age of Arcanum pre-Calamity, this being a little teaser to the Aeor arc that will come way later down the line in this series. We then flash over to Fjord, who arrives at the gates of Nicodranas, but he is denied entry, Fjord screaming at the guards to let him pass when we see a pulse of magic erupting out of him, as he accidentally casts Charm Person on the guards who let him in, as we begin to see Fjord's warlock powers slowly manifesting. Over at the inn, we see Bo shadowboxing, replaying her fight with the Volstrucker, as she makes the connection that the crystals embedded in the Volstrucker's arm, which gives them great magical abilities, are residuum crystals. Meanwhile, we see Knott has been up to some stealing while Caleb was asleep. Knott not being as quiet as she thought she was as the innkeeper busts into the stables with a crossbow in hand. Caleb and Knott managing to flee, Caleb casting a gust of wind as the horses break out running free, Knott grabbing the man's crossbow as they run away. Bo coming outside as she sees her horse fleeing along with Caleb and Knott. Oh yeah, and Caleb gets more shit flung at his face again. Back in Xhorhas, we see Essek visiting his mother. His mother, we come to learn, is very sick, and Essek has been keeping her hidden to try and find a cure. As he says, if the Bright Queen learned of her illness, which Essek calls typhros, she would execute her, as we watch Essek's mother go into a kind of panic state, as she then flooded with memories of her past lives, the woman unable to grasp with the life she currently is in, as we see visions of her past. Essek's mother likely being very old, as it seems like this is some sort of unintended consequence at having been reincarnated multiple times. Essek wanting to save her from her sickness, and also seemingly not wanting her to die and be reborn again into another life. We move over to Nicodranas as we see Fjord wandering the city. He sees a group of boys bullying another boy. Fjord can't help but see himself in the boy getting bullied as he does nothing. Fjord's warlock powers again manifest on their own as he casts massive many faces on himself, briefly transforming to that of a human. Fjord then comes across Lord Sharp making a speech in the city square, the man discussing Nicodranas' ties to the Empire and how they are close friends, and how they should be loyal and assist the Empire in their upcoming war against the Kryn, as we see Lord Sharp echoing the propaganda points about the dynasty. The man's speech, though, is interrupted by a little gerbil spirit, his banners being replaced by vulgar ones drawn by Jester, who is laughing up above him on the ramparts, as the Lord ordered his guards to get her. Jester is chased through the city as she runs into Fjord, as the Fjord-Jester love arc is then immediately teased, Jester thinking Fjord is a hero who is going to help her, Fjord accidentally summoning his blade to his hand and casting Eldritch Blast at the oncoming guards. Fjord is absolutely baffled by this, as to his knowledge he has no magical abilities. They are then chased into a home by the guards as Fjord frantically tries to reason with them, Fjord very much still being a coward, but again he accidentally casts Eldritch Blast at them. He and Jester then run away, Jester leading him to the lavish chateau as she takes him up to her room. In the corner of her room, we see a fun little Easter egg to Trinket, Vex's bear, Laura's other character from Campaign 1, as well as the two moons of Exandria, Catha and Ruidus, a reference to Laura's Campaign 3 character Imogen, Jester then telling Fjord about her god and friend, the Traveler, as we see a picture Jester drew of her and the Traveler together. Jester thinks Fjord is a heroic ship captain. As Fjord looks at himself in the mirror, he takes on the mannerisms of Vandrin, assuming his southern accent. Jester then uses her clerical magic from the Traveler to cure his wounds, which takes the form of a little spiritual bear, which we watch patch him up. We then see Lord Sharp enter the lavish chateau as he begins questioning Blood on where Jester is, the man stabbing the Great Minotaur. Marion then busts into Jester's room as she tells Jester that she needs to run away, that she should go to Zadash and the Empire and meet up with her friend at the Pillow Trove, Marion begging Fjord to look after her daughter, Fjord reluctantly agreeing. We move over to Knott and Caleb in the woods, not being scared to cross a pond of water. Caleb then picks her up and carries her on his shoulders. As we know, Knott's fear of water comes from her backstory and her tragic transformation to her godlike form, as we begin to see that Caleb and Knott are growing much closer. Knott showing Caleb the wanted poster she found, but she did not turn him in. Caleb then explains to Knott he wants to go to the carnival because there he will be able to get an important spell component, a rare beetle, which he points out in the flyer. As Caleb says that they are going to need to communicate better, as he grabs a reed and teaches her the message spell. We move back to Jester and Fjord on the road as they have left Nicodranas. Jester talking about all the great things in Zadash, a fun reference to multiple places within the city that we see in Campaign 2, for example like the Chastity Nook, a smutty bookstore. Fjord being intrigued by the mention of the Solstice Academy, a place of magical study, as he wants to learn more about his new powers, as he has no idea where he got them. We then see Bo traveling alone in the woods, as unbeknownst to her, she is being trailed by the Volstrucker woman that she fought with. Back in Jorhaus, we see Essek teleport to somewhere in the Empire, as he is then found by Astrid and Eadwulf who take him to Trent. It being revealed here that it was Essek who was the one that helped Trent and the Volstrucker steal the beacon, as Essek, like Trent, believes the beacon should be taken apart and studied to learn everything about it. Essek seemingly wanting to do this in order to save his mother, as Essek explains to Trent that the beacon is an item of great primordial power. This power created the world itself, it being gravity, time, and reality, as within it, Essek sees multiple visions of different potential realities in his life, as we see him sitting happily with his mother and another drow. We then see him executed by the Bright Queen, and then we then see him alone in a frozen tundra, this likely being Isocross, this being a possible another fun teaser at the Aor arc. We flash back to Fjord and Jester who are asleep on the road, as we watch Fjord have his first dream vision of Uk'otoa, as we again see the events of the ship explosions replayed. Fjord bleeding out as he drowns, falling deep in the ocean, as the great massive eye of Uk'otoa opens behind him. This again being another awesome callback to the Campaign 2 animated opening. Uk'otoa healing Fjord as he says, "Become." Fjord's eyes then flashing open, as Episode 2 of the Mighty Nein comes to an end. And yes, that was the Mighty Nein Episode 2, and good God, guys, again, I am absolutely blown away by how freaking good this show is. Maybe I'm a bit biased because Campaign 2, in my opinion, is probably the best Critical Role campaign, at least for me. So actually getting to see it make this adaptation into an animated series is kind of unreal. So far, only 2 episodes in, I love everything about this series. I love the direction that they're taking the story, as obviously adapting a 1,000+ hours D&D campaign into a shorter animated series is going to be difficult. You naturally are going to have to cut some plot points, you're going to have to shave some things off the sides and make it a bit more streamlined. As we see, they are kind of doing this with the Beacon storyline, making the Beacon and Trent the kind of primary storyline, at least for the foreseeable future for the animated series, something that obviously wasn't exactly the case with Campaign 2. Personally though, I actually kind of really like this change. I think of all of the changes they could have made to this story to try to streamline it a bit more, this is probably the best way they could have gone with it, as it really does allow us to get a kind of deeper understanding and a look kind of behind the curtain as to a lot of things that were going on in the early stages of Campaign 2 that we, the audience and the players, just weren't aware of, specifically all the things going on with Trent, the Volstrucker, Essek in Jorhaus, all of these things, kind of moving in the backgrounds. I think they've learned a lot from the first few seasons of Legend of Vox Machina, and they were able to take what they've learned, the mistakes that they made in that animated series, and correct them here for this one. As I love the level of exploration that we're getting into our characters here. I love that we're starting off kind of at the beginning, pre-episode 1 of campaign 2, we're actually getting to see, the events that ultimately led to the Mighty Nein joining together at Trostenwald, joining together at the, the Moondrop Carnival of Curiosities. So we're getting a lot more depth into our character stories. We're getting a lot more kind of an homage to the long-term character stories that are being told, especially with the likes of like Fjord, and like Caleb and Knott. I think this is super important because it really does kind of help craft and round out our characters, and it really like cements a lot of the kind of character relationships that we see become very important, throughout campaign 2. By getting to see like this kind of evolution of the relationship between Knott and Caleb, it really does help us kind of understand why they become so close so quickly, and ultimately why those two characters have a bit of pushback, against the other party members later on in the series. Obviously, a big kind of crux for episode 2 here is Fjord's backstory. Everything with Sabian, the explosion on the ship, his relationship with Vandrin, how he ultimately came to be a warlock of, the Great Leviathan Ikutoa, even though he doesn't realize this. For quite a while, actually, we actually get to see him, this kind of first evolution steps of how Fjord ultimately manifests his warlock powers, how he unbeknowingly made a pact with this great, demigod serpent being of the Calamity. I absolutely love warlocks in Dungeons & Dragons. They're probably one of my favorite classes to actually get to roleplay and play, and so because of that, I'm a big fan of Fjord and his character arc, his story arc in Campaign 2, so it really is awesome getting to see these scenes play out, and I have to say, this opening scene here with Vandrin and the shipwreck, Ikutoa arriving in this massive storm, was like absolutely amazing. Like from a visual perspective and a kind of, feeling vibes-based perspective, how the scene made me feel, it was just amazing. Probably my favorite scene from this episode, aside from the vision scene at the closing of the episode, which is by far probably the best scene. As I really love what they're doing with Fjord's character arc as they're kind of honing in on this kind of hero's journey, this kind of classic hero's journey that kind of Fjord goes on, as we see that Fjord, they very much focus on the fact that Fjord is a coward. He is someone with very little confidence, and he, is someone who really is an actor. Like, he puts on this fake facade of confidence, donning the kind of, visage of his mentor, of the man that he looks up to, Vandrin, and channeling this as this kind of false bravado. But in reality, he is still the same, lost, bullied young boy, young man that Vandrin found, and he will be like that for a very long time. Fjord, though, slowly beginning to kind of develop this confidence as he manifests his warlock powers, this creating a very interesting relationship between him and his not-so-great patron we'll see further down the line, as Fjord very much values himself based off of his powers and abilities that he gets from his patron, which personally I'm a massive fan of, as it really is going to be interesting seeing the likes of like Fjord and specifically Caleb and their kind of character story arcs that they journey through, throughout campaign 2, as they are kind of, in my opinion, I would say, the most like pronounced kind of story arcs that you'll see with the biggest kind of character change and progression over time. Obviously, Caleb's is probably the most profound, as my boy has to overcome his, horrible trauma at the hands of one Trent Ickathon, the Empire propaganda that was stuffed into his head, and the horrible traumatic events, of his Volstrucker training of his childhood. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. I am loving the Mighty Nein animated series so far. I think it really does an amazing job in capturing the feeling, the vibe, the party dynamics, the story overall, and the world of Campaign 2, as Campaign 2 really is a story that I think focuses much more on kind of like political subterfuge. It is a much more human, real story that you can relate to, and I think that's why a lot of people really love Campaign 2 and find it as their favorite. It is a story that anyone can relate to, a story of a group of kind of misfits that find themselves trapped within this great, bigger kind of world, this world of like politics and conflict between two neighboring empires and dynasty here. Again, we're only 2 episodes in, so I don't really know what else to say, but already this show, this animated series, is hitting it out of the park. Again, I think they've learned a lot of the mistakes that they made in The Legend of Vox Machina. Not to say The Legend of Vox Machina is a bad show. I absolutely love it as a Campaign 1 enjoyer. I made a bunch of videos on it. I think it's great, but I do think that so far at least from the tone of Campaign 2 and the way that they're portraying the world, the art style, the animations, the way that they're telling the character's story, I think that they learned from a lot of the mistakes they made in Campaign 2, and I think that, or Campaign 1 in Legend of Vox Machina, I should say, and I think that the Mighty Nein animated series will be a better series, a better animated series when it's all said and done. I think it will be much more accessible to the, the average non-Critical Role fan watcher. And I think that just overall, it's going to tell a much cooler, just better story than Legend of Vox Machina. I think it's just fantastic. I think it's amazing. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. As always though, guys, with these videos, these are just my thoughts and opinions. So feel free to let me know yours in the comment section down below. If you did enjoy this video, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, as that is the easiest way to support me, and it really does go a long way in putting this video into the algorithm. If you did like this video, then why don't you check out some of my other Critical Role and Mighty Nein content, like my video I did over episode 1, which I'll put in the which I'll put on screen now. As well, you might be interested in my Campaign 2 in a nutshell video, which I also put on screen now, as I condensed the thousands of hours of Campaign 2 down to around an hour of Campaign 2 in a nutshell, which I think will be really good in giving you a refresher for the Mighty Nein animated series. Thank you again, guys, for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace, love, auto.